Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Millionaires are being made all season long at DraftKings.com, America's favorite one-week fantasy football site. One-week fantasy means no season-long commitments. Play whenever you want. Got a player who's hurt? No problem. Injuries won't derail your shot at victory because it's like a new season every week, so you're never stuck with the same players. Pick your team in minutes, and you could be on your way to winning huge cash. This season, one listener turned $10 into $5,000. Another turned $2 into $10,000, and a new millionaire has been crowned nearly every week this season at DraftKings.com. You could be next. Imagine winning $1 million in one day just playing fantasy football at DraftKings. Head to DraftKings.com now and use promo code Spreaker to play free in the $10 million Fantasy Football World Championships. DraftKings.com. Bigger events, bigger winnings, bigger millionaires. Enter Spreaker now at DraftKings.com. DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
1, 2. Check me out right here, yo.
Yo, the sun don't shine forever, but as long as it's here, then we might as well shine together. Better now than never, business before pleasure. P. Diddy and the fam, who you know do it better. Yeah, right, no matter what, we airtight. So when you hear something,
welcome back to the Bob Sullivan Show here on LateNightSportsRadio.com. If you'd like to call in, the number is 585-633-7487. However, do not bother calling in if your name is not Bob Sullivan. Tonight, the most special Bob Sullivan Show ever. I am joined by three fantastic people named Bob Sullivan. First off, I'm joined by Bob Sullivan from SportingCharts.com from Calgary. And are you from Alberta in Canada?
That's right, Calgary, Alberta.
All right. Well, you know, I'm not the smartest Bob Sullivan out there, but I do know my provinces and my cities in Canada.
Well, thanks a lot, Bob, for having me on. But you didn't have to go ahead and name the show after me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope we can agree to this, that you will not sue me for naming rights to this show.
Deal.
Okay. Well, what's it like being, you're the Canadian Bob Sullivan. I have a West Coast Bob Sullivan coming on tonight and an East Coast Bob Sullivan. I'm the Midwest Bob Sullivan. What's it like being the Canadian Bob Sullivan?
Well, I've got a pretty good large land mass to cover, so I'll take the fact that I've got probably the largest, physical area. So.
Well, and I'd like to actually give you credit for this idea because it was your idea. You wanted to come on my show. I brought in the idea to include more Bob Sullivans, but I would like to thank you for the initial idea.
Well, thanks. It just seemed natural.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many of us. I tried to include one from Ireland. He declined, so I'm going to call him out right now. Bob Sullivan from Ireland, you are ashamed to the name.
Yeah, he's our ancestor from way back, the homeland.
Yeah, the homeland. I felt like we needed somebody from the homeland, and the fact that we didn't get one from the homeland is a little disappointing. But I feel like we got a good group of four here, a good pod of Bob Sullivans here, and I think it's going to be a good combination.
Perfect.
Now, living here in the States, I do a fair share amount of gambling and, drinking. And, you do work for SportingCharts.com. How do you, when you're putting together these charts and predictions, what is your research method for putting together these articles?
Well, so I guess you're referring to the golden rules.
Yes.
I guess, first of all, I'm just trying to come up with some sort of, recent idea, or there's got to be something that's going to capture the attention of the reader. And, for example, this year we've had, quarterbacks throw, 6 touchdown passes in a game. So I've thought, well, there's something that's happened. What's the result or the impact on the spread the following week after they throw 6 touchdown passes? So I kind of think of these questions, or Peyton Manning has a historic game. How does he typically play after, he has this amazing game? Things like this I think of, and then I look into what the historical trends are.
Yeah. Looking at, these different these questions you have, I always have those type of questions, and, it's like whenever I ask the question, the questions I want to know, ESPN has never researched them. It's like, I'm always wondering, what are some of these stats the week after throwing 6 touchdown passes, with Roethlisberger, and then he went on to throw 6 touchdowns again. But their stats are always like, what did LeBron do the day after he brushed his teeth twice, and then, he scored 25 points. If he brushed his teeth twice in a day, he scores 25, at least, 5 out of every 6 games. How in-depth do you go into your research?
Well, first of all, where I think I fill in where an ESPN doesn't is I don't see often the analysis on the spread. So you have, okay, this is what's happened historically, but I look at it and say, well, this is what has happened historically versus the spread. So I don't try not to get too crazy, but about the smallest minute details. But it has to be something interesting. It has to be something topical. Like this for week 14, I'm like, well, it's December now. Games are getting colder. We've got games this week being played in Minneapolis outside now, Green Bay, Chicago. What's the impact of games outside? So that would be an example of maybe as in depth or in detail as I go.
What are some things that you found interesting about Tony Romo? Not just, everybody, the basics are, everybody will say, hey, he's bad in December. But what are your specifics when it comes to Romo? What is it? December actually his worst month, or is there another month out there that people aren't talking about? What do you think as far as Tony Romo goes?
Well, from a win-loss perspective, nothing is worse as December. Well, maybe with the exception of January. But the question with Romo is as far as his team goes. I mean, he puts up a lot of points. So teams that put up a lot of points have a better chance of covering. So you always have that going for you. I think games like last week, a home game, a Thursday night game, or really a Thursday day game, very unusual for Romo and the Cowboys. It pretty much shocked me that the Cowboys would only put up 10 points, but it's it's not foolproof, and as long as things go 60%, 70% of the time, then you can have some success.
Before we get back to football, this whole Bob Sullivan thing. When the other 3 Bob Sullivans I'm having on the show, they have their avatar, your avatar, and the other 2 Bob Sullivans have a picture of yourselves as the avatar on Twitter. I, on the other hand, just have my show logo. However, I have tweeted out pictures of myself. Should I go with an avatar of myself to kind of get into this group of Bob Sullivans, or am I disgracing the name of Bob Sullivans by not having my picture out there?
No, I don't think so. Whatever you feel like, you should switch it up every once in a while. Like I used to have one of me like juggling a bunch of football helmets or whatever. Mm-hmm. So go with the flow.
You just go with whatever works. There's not going to be any judgment from you, though. As far as if I don't have an avatar with my picture on it, though, right?
No, I'm cool with that.
Okay. As far as the name Bob Sullivan goes, what made you decide I'm not gonna go with Robert, I'm not gonna go with Bobby, I'm gonna be Bob Sullivan? When did you make that decision?
My parents made it for me. I'm actually named after an Uncle Bob.
Oh, Oh, so from the get-go, you were Bob.
Oh, yeah. Maybe
Okay.
Bobby. I got Bobby once in a while when I was a little kid. Again, when you play sports, guys call you Bobby, softball team, that kind of thing.
I actually got the name Bob. I went by Bobby growing up. I was, all the way through, middle of high school. And I went to one of the laziest high schools on the face of the earth. I mean, really lazy as far as, athletes, students, all that, you name it. Everybody in the school was lazy. There was nobody with any real, ambition. But during baseball season, they were so lazy to call me Bobby, they had to cut off those last two letters and just go by Bob. And it took off from there. I started going by Bob, and it worked out in the end. So, the Bobby Sullivan Show doesn't work. The Bob Sullivan Show works, and I feel like it's a tight-knit community of these Bob Sullivans we got here.
Yeah, no, that's good. My middle initial is E, so like my credit card actually says Bobby Sullivan, but it's
wow. Okay, well, I mean, you're kind of like the Chuck E. Cheese of Bob Sullivan's.
Yes, good comparison.
Okay. But back to the NFL. When do you start, at what point when you're, making these with these golden rules, what trends do you see with teams that, like the Raiders? What reads do you get on the Raiders? At a certain point in the season, is it like, okay, they're going to still lose 5 more games, but they're going to win 2 down the road? How do you make, calls on the Raiders or the Lions from when they went 0-16 with just really, really historically bad teams? How do you make calls on those teams?
Well, the Raiders are actually a good team to talk about because I did some analysis midway through the season. I had kind of a mid-season recap of what has transpired so far, and there are really 4 brutal teams in the AFC. Obviously the Raiders, Jaguars, Titans, and the Jets. And at that time, it seemed by the record, the Raiders were the only team that hadn't won yet, so you're like, oh, they're the worst of the bunch. But actually, their margins of victory were smaller, and they were covering a lot more spreads than the other teams. So it actually kind of told me, well, they may be 0-4, but they might actually be, a little bit better than some of those other teams. Or at least they're exceeding our expectations, so to speak, as much as you can say that for a team that's gone winless. Well, winless to that point.
Well, with the Raiders, do you see any, with, I don't know, just looking at different trends, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel, whether you look at, what Derek Carr's done thus far as a rookie, or Khalil Mack, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel for them? Because that's one franchise where you want to have light at the end of the tunnel. Otherwise, it's not a good situation there in Oakland.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the game closely last week, and that was an embarrassment, really. But I think the light at the end of the tunnel might be on defense. I mean, they kept San Diego close. Obviously, they beat Kansas City. They actually seem to play pretty well in their own division. As I said, they're staying in ball games a lot more than you would think. They're just losing more. So I think the light in the end of the tunnel's on D.
Well, with the Raiders, I know the Raiders fans don't even want to hear about the Raiders right now, but I do kind of want to hear about the Raiders. Looking at them, a few years ago, Jason Campbell was starting to kind of get his, his feet under himself as an NFL quarterback. They were playing well. They went 8-8 with Tom Cable. And then Campbell gets injured, Cable gets fired, they bring in Carson Palmer, that experiment doesn't work out, they give up draft picks. Did you ever, looking back at the Raiders, did you ever see Jason Campbell working out for them? Because if he doesn't get injured, it was a collarbone injury. Like, they had a blowout of the Broncos, granted it was before, Peyton Manning and it was